What's up, everyone? I'm James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be taking a look at the UFC 280 lightweight main card fight between Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell on this video. You do those three things. It really does help with this channel a lot, and it's a simple thing to do. It takes like a couple seconds, and it helps the video with the algorithm, views, all that good stuff. So really would appreciate it if you did that. Okay, let's get into this one. This was requested, and this was one I was going to do anyways. I love this fight. Dariush, Gamrot, pivotal fight in the lightweight division. Only 3 rounds. And another little tidbit before we get into this, it was known recently in an interview with MMA Fighting that Beneil Dariush will be the backup for this fighter. That's right, not Alex Volkanovski, not the featherweight champ, and obviously not Gamrot either. Let's hope nothing happens in the main event. Knock on wood. Don't break any mirrors or hang out with any black cats or walk under any ladders. Let's hope that fight happens. But did have to mention that Dariush is tabbed as the backup in this situation. Of course, Dariush and Islam Makhachev, who's in the main event, were supposed to fight. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Dariush the backup for this one. Okay, let's get into Benny, as they call him, from King's MMA. One half of this fight. So Beneil Dariush, you can see there, 21-4-1. He's got 5 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 8 decisions. He's 33 years old, as you can see here, turned 33 in May. He's 5'10" with a 72-inch reach. So he'll have a 1.5-inch reach advantage in this fight, but he's the exact same height as Gamrot, if you look at him there. Like I mentioned there, he's the number 6 ranked UFC lightweight. He is a BJJ black belt, and he's also a Muay Thai black belt. By the way, I had someone give me some grief a couple weeks ago in another breakdown I did about a Muay Thai black belt. It's just what it says on his record here. So I'm just reading what they say. People are like, Muay Thai black belt doesn't exist. Again, I'm just reading what I see on his stat line there. Like I mentioned there, Dariush trains at King's MMA. Some notable things that Dariush has done in his career so far. He's got performance of the night 4 times against Darren Cruikshank, Drew Dober, Frank Camacho, and Drakkar Klose. So obviously very exciting guy in the cage. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Diego Ferreira. And he got the 2020 UFC Honors Comeback of the Year when he fought Drakkar Klose. A very, very awesome firefight. If you haven't seen that one, go back and watch that fight. Really vintage stuff there from Beneil Dariush. Okay, Dariush, like some fighters, when we do these previews, did not have an amateur career. He started in his MMA career back in November of 2009. Didn't make his UFC debut until January of 2014. He was 7-0 at the time, and 6-0 at the time, fought Charlie Brenneman. First loss was against Ramsey Nijem the fight after that. Dariush is 15-4 in the UFC. He's got 8 stoppage victories. Some notable wins for Diego Ferreira. I got ahead of myself there. For Beneil Dariush, he's got 2 wins over Diego Ferreira. He's also got a win over Jim Miller. Got a win over Michael Johnson, which is a split decision. We'll talk about that in a sec. Thiago Moises, which is a really good win there. I believe that was Moises' debut. Could be wrong about that. Was that his UFC debut? It was. There you go. So it was his debut after winning on Contender Series. Also has a win over Drew Dober. And then his last fight was very notable, defeating Tony Ferguson. So there you go. Those are some notable wins, some notable losses. I mentioned the Ramsey Nijem fight, the one that I fumbled there. So Nijem got finished in that fight. Michael Chiesa finished him as well, back when Chiesa was a lightweight. Edson Barbosa knocked him out with the flying knee. And then he got knocked out by Alexander Hernandez in Alexander Hernandez's UFC debut, which is such a weird fight looking back because Hernandez has not had the success that he had in that one fight. He hasn't been able to replicate that really. So that was a really big win for Hernandez. Short notice. It was supposed to be, as you can see, Bobby Green and Dariush. In steps Alexander Hernandez, who, by the way, has the same management as Green, and Hernandez ended up getting the win there. So that's Dariush's UFC career. Now, Dariush, I went back and looked. He's had a few injuries that have taken him out of some fights. If you look here, the Maribek-Taisimov fight, which was supposed to happen in January of 2016, he had to withdraw due to that fight, due to injury. He's supposed to fight Drakkar Klose back in July of 2019. Ended up having to pull out of that fight due to an injury there. He was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev earlier this year. He had an ankle injury, and that, of course, forced that fight to be canceled, basically. Well, sorry, Makhachev ended up getting a replacement in that one, but again, key fight there for Dariush that he did not get. Probably one of the reasons why Makhachev is getting the title shot and Dariush isn't. So some bad luck there injury-wise for Beneil Dariush. Now, one of the things with Dariush is he's been pretty active since starting his UFC career way back in 2014. You look at it here, he's fought sometimes 3 times a year, sometimes 2. But lately, he's had 1 layoff here. So going from Scott Holtzman, where are we here? Scott Holtzman to Diego Ferreira. There's a bit of a layoff there, 182 days. But the biggest layoff he's had in his career is actually going to be in this fight. So he fought Tony Ferguson back in May of 2021. He's going to be fighting Gamrot in October of 2022. and there's going to be a 525-day layoff. So something to keep in mind here, really long layoff here for Beneil Dariush coming into this fight, something he's never experienced. Like I said, the closest one he had before that was just under 200 days. Here he's got a 500-day layoff, which is pretty crazy. Okay, now you'll see a couple a lot of decisions here for Dariush, 8 total in his MMA career. Let's go back and look at some close fights that he's had. Not all of them were close; some of them were more decisive. Beneil Dariush defeating Michael Johnson. Kind of forgot about this one. I went back and looked at the media scorecards for this one. Check this out. This was at UFC 273, Teixeira versus St. Preux, and that was back in August of 2015. 12 media members scored the fight for Michael Johnson. 0 media members scored the fight for Beneil Dariush. So you look at it back then, and Dariush was the underdog there too. Maybe that doesn't go his way. Maybe that changes things on his career trajectory. You never know. It's always like looking back at fights like that. And then he had the fight with Evan Dunham, which, if you remember, was a draw. Where are we here? The draw with Evan Dunham. It was a majority decision draw. Went back and looked at that one. Most people felt like it was a draw. There was 10 media members scoring it a draw. 5 scoring it for Dariush, though. So some people felt like he should have won. So maybe that one goes his way. Maybe the Johnson one doesn't. You never know. But anyways, I only point these out because, sometimes when you look at the overall record, you forget about stuff like this. So I got to point it out. So that's pretty much it for Beneil Dariush. Again, really amazing fighter in the weight class. Comes from a great camp. Well-deserved spot on this card. And really, really big fight here against Gamrot. Let's get into his opponent, shall we? Mateusz Gamrot. Mateusz Gamrot, you can see there, 21-1. He's got 7 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 9 decisions. Gamrot will be turning 32 on December 11th. So he's only 1 year younger than Beneil Dariush in this fight. He's 5'10" with a 70.5 inch reach. So like I mentioned there, same height as Dariush, but he's going to be a little bit not as long as Dariush will be in this fight. And already in just, 5 UFC fights, Gamrot has already racked up Performance of the Night 2 times. He's got Fight of the Night 2 times. So he got Performance of the Night, I should mention, against Scott Holtzman and Jeremy Stevens. He got Fight of the Night 2 times against Goram and Arman Tsarukyan. He's got the fastest submission by a Kimura in UFC history. 65 seconds was all he needed to take out Jeremy Stevens. Pretty impressive there. Like Dariush, he is a BJJ black belt. So you think if this goes to the mat, pretty even there, right? In terms of their credentials. And the other notable thing, which we got to bring up here, he is a former KSW lightweight and featherweight champion. That's good accolades to have. Of course, we've seen a lot of notable fighters come from KSW. I think Ioni and Jacek, Jan Blachowicz for sure came from KSW. So that's a pretty established European promotion. Good credentials as far as having that coming over to the UFC a little bit later in his career. Like Dariush, he did not have an amateur debut. He had his MMA debut in February of 2012, had his UFC debut in October of 2020 against Goram. And just to give a little context of how much more UFC experience Dariush has, Dariush had 18 UFC fights before Gamrot made his UFC debut. So just think about that. It's pretty crazy considering how many fights Dariush had already at that point. So Dariush had been in the UFC for a while before he made his debut. Now, should be pointed out that KSW, I mentioned, great promotion. Their fighters are paid well. I mean, Gamrot could have come, if Gamrot was an American fighter, he's probably in the UFC a little bit earlier, but that is interesting to note that he did not make his debut until 2020, whereas Dariush did way back in 2015. So about a 5-year difference there. I mentioned it there. Gamrot is 4-1 in the UFC. He's got 3 stoppage victories. Some notable wins already include Jeremy Stevens, Diego Ferreira. So they have a common opponent there. And Arman Tsarukyan, a very close fight. We'll talk about the scorecards in that in a sec. But I mean, let me know what you guys think. That was one of the best fights I've ever seen, him and Arman. I mean, just the high level skill on both ends was incredible. The scrambles, everything. I love that fight. I can go back and watch that fight a bunch of times. Amazing fight with him and Arman in a razor close fight and a very pivotal fight for the division, as we see here, this fight being on the mega UFC 280 card. One thing with Gamrot, no major layoffs. Well, he's only had 5 fights in the UFC, but even outside of that, not a ton of layoffs in his career overall, but we don't usually count those. We just talk about the UFC layoffs. He also hasn't had any injuries, but again, that's because he's only had 5 UFC fights. Now, I wanted to get back to some close fights here. You'll see here he lost a split decision to Goram. Went back and looked at the scorecards for that. That was UFC on ESPN plus 38 back in October of 2020. 14 media members scored the fight for Goram. 3 only scored it for Gamrot. So I think he clearly lost in that one. Again, though, close fight, but a lot of people felt like that was the right score. Now, the Arman Tsarukyan fight. And full disclosure, I remember watching that one live and thinking, I thought Arman might have pulled it out. Since watching it, I can see Gamrot getting the case for the win as well. Again, some of those rounds were razor close, but I went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. 7 media members scoring the fight for Gamrot, 15 media members scoring the fight for Arman. So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. If Arman wins that fight and instead of Gamrot, he's probably fighting Dariush instead of Gamrot. I think that was sort of the way the UFC had everything set up. Too bad, Arman. Hopefully we'll see him fight again soon against someone, but Gamrot's win is earning this opportunity here against Dariush. Now, at the time we're recording this, which today is September 19th, so just under a month before this fight actually takes place, we do not have odds on this fight. Here's the weird thing. They actually have odds on most of the other fights here, but they have odds on Bilal Muhammad and Sean Brady, who's not even on the main card, and Malcolm Gordon and Muhammad Mokaev, but they don't have them on this fight, which is very interesting. So no odds yet, but I did have a quick glance at the picks from Tapology, which, again, these aren't odds. This is just how people are picking. I guess there's 539 predictions. 70% of them are saying Gamrot in this fight, 30% Dariush. I'm not sure how the betting lines will be on this one, honestly. I could see Dariush being the favorite only because he's fought more opposition in the UFC. You could argue maybe he's fought better opposition, although that's tough to say. I think they're almost even at that point. But yeah, I could see Dariush being a slight favorite here. But anyways, who am I picking? Okay, so this is my theory on this fight. I could see this fight going the full 3 rounds. I'll just mention that as a could because these guys have gone the decision a lot. I think, you look at a fight like Tony Ferguson, and we know how tough Ferguson is to finish. That went the distance. Diego Ferreira went the distance. The guys that, the close fight. I mean, you go back and watch the Jakar close fight. Close was close to, no pun intended, close to knocking him out. It was very, very, very back and forth. It was one of those sort of firefights, and Dariush ended up getting the better of him and ended up knocking out Jakar Close. First knockout loss for Jakar Close in his career. So that was a pivotal fight. And Scott Holtzman, I mean, he hits like a hammer too, but, Holtzman's getting up there in age. He's taking a lot of damage, as is Frank Camacho as well. So, just a couple things I wanted to point out there as far as, maybe this fight could go the decision, because it seems like when he gets that step up in better opposition, it tends to go the decision. Same thing with Gamrot. He fights an Arman. Although Arman, I mean, who's finishing Arman, right? That's pretty tough too. So yeah, that school of thought of, yes, this could potentially go the distance, but I'm not going with that prediction. I'm going with the prediction of, we are going to see a finish. In fact, I'm going to make a bit of a bold prediction here. I don't mind doing that, in a fight like this, and I'm going to explain why I feel like this fight is going to go the way it is. Okay. So my official pick for this fight is Mateusz Gamrot by first round knockout. Now I know what you're going to say, James. Where's this coming from? Gamrot wasn't able to, he submitted a bunch of guys, right? He submitted, what was it? Gamrot submitted Jeremy Stevens. He technically submission due to strikes, although I guess is that a TKO victory? I guess it is. He's got a good ground game is kind of what we're getting at. Like, to submit Jeremy Stevens, very impressive. So maybe it's submission, but then you've got a guy in Dariush who's got a very good ground game. I don't think we'll see him get submitted, although Kies has submitted him. And mind you, that was years ago. The reason I say knockout is because, he's also knocked out Scott Holtzman. He's also got a lot of knockouts here in his career, which has been very impressive. And here's the thing with Dariush that I'm going to argue here. Dariush has not fought a power puncher in quite some time here. Ferguson, not a power puncher. Diego Ferreira was a bit of a power puncher. We haven't seen that lately. Holtzman is, but like I mentioned, the age is catching up to him. And Jakar Close, who isn't really a power puncher in my opinion, nearly finished him in that fight as well. So and there's a theme here with Dariush that you've seen throughout his career. And maybe I'm being that guy who's maybe living too much in the past here, but we've seen in a couple instances where the way to beat Dariush is you flurry him early. Alex Hernandez did that, finished him in the first round. Edson Barbosa was second round, but still we saw him get knocked out there. The Ramsey Nijam fight was also a first round finish where he was flurried. Gamrot's that type of guy. We've seen him go out there and get quick finishes like we saw against Jeremy Stevens. We've seen that earlier in his career as well in some other fights. You look here, Tim Newman. I'm just saying, like, we have seen Gamrot have that urgency and go out there and look to finish very quickly here. So I could see him catching Dariush here. Not to mention the long layoff for Dariush coming into this fight. Gamrot's very dangerous right now. He's got a lot of momentum. There's a really big win for him over Arman Saryukin. I could see Gamrot going out there and finishing Beneil Dariush early on in this fight. That's going to be my prediction. I think Gamrot goes out there and finishes Dariush in the first round and does what I think other fighters have tried to do, but I think Gamrot will actually get it done. And I think he goes out there and I think he shines in a big way here. He's a little bit younger, like I mentioned. I think based off that Arman fight, I think that was a fight that showed these two guys are in the top 5. I really believe that. I think Arman right now, despite losing, should be in that top 5 in terms of where I have him in the division. I think he can, I think Saryukin, I think both those guys, I think they could fight any of the guys in the top 5 and I think they would be competitive. I really believe that. Okay. Dariush, he is top 5 as well. I guess technically he's top 6, but I think he's in that mix as well, but I don't know, like I haven't been overly impressed with him. Like to be completely honest, like the knockout wins over Close and Holtzman were great. You definitely see an evolution there. A Ferguson fight was a complete, I mean, Ferguson wasn't in that fight at all. He clearly beat Ferguson in that one. And I think if Ferguson wasn't so damn tough, maybe he does get a finish there. But I just feel like we haven't seen that extra gear. And I feel like we have seen that with Gamrot. You just look at the way he performed in that last fight. I think we are seeing that extra gear here. So I'm taking Gamrot by first round knockout. Could this fight end up going the distance? Could Dariush end up stealing a decision? Of course. That's entirely possible here. But I just think that Gamrot is catching Dariush at a good time with the layoff, with the fact that, Dariush is being tabbed as his backup. Does that play into his head that he thinks that maybe he's a little bit above this fight? I don't know. But I think Gamrot goes out there and really shines and really puts a stamp on the fact that he should be next in line for the title. So again, I will say it one more time. My official pick here is Mateusz Gamrot by first round knockout. Getting it done. Sorry, I should get his photo up. Getting it done over Beneil Dariush at UFC 280. Okay. As I always tell you guys on these live streams or on these early look shows, if you guys want to talk about this fight, I'm more than happy to do that. Any insults, any like, you don't know what you're talking about or whatever, I'm not going to do it. There's no point. Listen, I want to create a cool community here on this channel where we can talk about fights and we can, prove our points. Did I make a mistake in this video? Maybe I did. Let's hear it. Let's talk about that mistake. Let's talk about any of the other things that any intangibles, any other things I might have missed in this breakdown or something that you might think I got wrong, but let's do it in a cool manner here. I always have to mention this because people just, I don't know what it is about picking fights. People get so crazy about it. Let's just keep this very civil and I can more than happily discuss this fight with you. I love being interactive with you guys, but only if we're going to do it in a respectful way. That's all I'm saying here, right? So that's my thoughts on that. And also, if there's any other fights you want me to preview coming up, obviously any of the title fights that have been booked, I'll have those on my list. I think we've covered everything on 280 for the most part. I don't know if there's any other fights I'm going to end up breaking down, but I think we've covered most of it there. But yeah, I'm always open to suggestions. So if there's any other fights you can think of, that you think are maybe not as notable that you would like me to break down, more than happy to do that. One more time, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification. But also follow me on Twitter and on Instagram and on TikTok at Lynch on Sports. I'm posting content on there all the time. I'm James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time and really appreciate you tuning in to this early look breakdown of Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot.